welcome to Aldebaran Resources live event hosted by Six. I'm very pleased to have on the platform today Aldebaran's CEO and Director, John Black, as well as their CGO and Director, Dr. Kevin B. Heather. They're going to take us through a presentation on recent news and exploration efforts at Altar, followed by a live Q&A period. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions on the chat panel on the right-hand side of the screen at any point during the presentation. As always, the summit is being recorded and will be available on Six.com to watch afterwards. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to John and Dr. Kevin to kick things off.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Romeo. And I'd like to thank you and the Six team for providing this format for us. This has been a great way for us to pass on information and elaborate a bit more when we put out news. It has been some time since we've had one of these. In the past few months, what we've been really focusing on is completing a financing, which has turned out to be even more critical. As all of us are aware, the markets are pretty challenging right now, and I'm very, very pleased to remind everyone that we just closed a financing of a little over 20 million Canadian, which sets us up very well for the coming year and the field season that we'll be talking about with Kevin's presentation here shortly. A lot of that financing was completed with a strong support from a couple of our strategic partners, most notably South 32 and Route 1 provided the backbone of that financing, but we also had other existing shareholders participate as well as a few new names come in too. So we strongly appreciate that support, and we feel quite fortunate to be in the position we're in. Many of our peers are struggling a little bit to obtain financing in this market. Just a few words on the market overall is that these are challenging times, and we're seeing a lot of downward pressure on commodities at the moment. It reminds me a lot of 2008, 2009 when we went into the global financial crisis. Our predecessor company, Antares Minerals, that we had at that time, also was sitting on a very nice project. We were recently in a very good cash position, and we faced a decision about whether we move forward aggressively on the project in a tough market and utilize the cash to do that, to go forward. And quite fortunately, we convinced our board that that was a good idea to move forward, produce results during that period of time, and be in a strong position that when the market rebounded, we were delivering great results. And that turned out we sold Antares approximately 18 months after the bottom of that market. So I think this, as an old timer in this business, this really reminds me a lot of that type of a situation where we probably will have challenging markets for a little bit right now. We're in a good position to continue to advance the project, and I very much look forward to delivering the results of the upcoming field season throughout next year and hopefully into a much stronger and more robust market and be in a great position to see a strong rebound. So look forward to any interaction with the shareholders to discuss those type of concepts moving forward. But let's focus today on really kind of walking everyone through the results that we just put out, which was the remaining results from last field season's campaign, as well as a brief overview of what to look forward in the next few months. So I'll turn it over to Kevin to give the presentation, and then we'll have time for question and answers afterwards.
Great. Thanks, John, and thanks everybody for joining us today. And for those that may watch on the video replay, I'll just share my screen here. So everybody can see the screen now. Romeo or John, can you confirm?
Yes, Kevin.
Okay, great. Okay, as John mentioned, today what we'd like to briefly take you through is just an update on the remaining results. I'm not going to go into them in excruciating detail because there was quite a few holes that were released. But what I'd rather do is kind of put them into the overall context and how that sets us up for the coming field season, and then some brief words. The usual disclaimer, those that know me, I do make forward-looking statements at times. Just for those that might be on the call that don't know where we are, we're located in Argentina, in northwestern Argentina, within one of the mining-friendly provinces, probably the most mining-friendly province in Argentina, in San Juan, where it's host to a number of very large copper, gold, and gold deposits. Altar is located here in the south western portion of the province. roughly 25 kilometers north of the producing Las Palambres mine of Antofagasta Minerals in Chile, and 25 kilometers north of Glencore's El Pachon project that they're currently in about the same sort of stage, or maybe a little bit more advanced than we are. And then about 50 kilometers south of McEwen Copper's Los Azules deposit. And then up in the north, this Jose Maria Filo del Sol cluster of porphyry copper gold deposits. Just a refresher for people, we already have a substantial resource here. This is based on our 2021 resource, and you can see this is a long section through the main porphyry centers. And you can see we've got the Altar Central Porphyry Center, the Altar East Porphyry Center, and you can see the conceptual pit. We also, 3 kilometers further to the west, we have the radio porphyry. That's currently not in resource, but we hope to, in the not too distant future, be putting together a resource after the current upcoming drill campaign. But I'll talk a little bit about that in more detail. So the focus of the 2022-2023 drilling campaign was really testing the conceptual idea. And one of the main reasons why we picked the project up is that there must be some, or there was indications that there was mineralization potential between the two known areas of mineralization. And you can see the way the conceptual pit here has this very strange hump in the middle. And that's because most of the drilling historically in here was very sparse and not very deep. And so we thought, based on our geological analysis during our due diligence for the project back in 2018, we thought that there was potential based on what we were seeing from drill holes in the surrounding rocks, that there was some potential here. And so this is now just a plan map of that main Altar Central, Altar East area. And I'll just point out a couple of things here for you. First, you can see this white line. That's that conceptual 2021 resource pit outline. And then you can see I've superimposed on here this black dash line. That's a geophysical anomaly. In this case, it's the 3D magnetotelluric, or MT, resistivity feature, or the reverse, really, it's a conductivity feature. And we've discussed that ad nauseum in various other webinars, so I'm not going to go into that in any detail here. But suffice it to say, it's a very large anomaly. And again, I put your eyes down here in the scale bar. This anomaly is over 2 kilometers long and a couple kilometers wide. So it's quite a large feature. And so if I superimpose the known mineralized centers, Altar Central located here, Altar East located here, you can see they both fall within that large geophysical feature. And you can see where most of our drilling this past campaign was focused, in this newly defined Altar United area. And previously, we had released 7 drill holes prior to just a few days ago. We now have released in total 14 holes, totaling a little over 14,600 meters. And the holes that I will really briefly discuss today are these holes that you see listed over here. I'm not going to go through each hole in detail. But rather, I would sooner put all of these holes plus the previous campaign holes into a broader context of what it might mean and what we're planning to do moving forward. As I always do, I think when you read our press releases, the quotes really say it all. And I've in particular, not because I don't like John's quote, but they both more or less say the same thing. Mine's just a little bit more detailed in its analysis, and so I've highlighted here. But basically, the campaign for 2022 and 2023 really kind of solidified our original conceptual idea that there may be mineralization between the two centers. And that has been borne out by the discovery of the new Altar United mineralization. And that looks like it clearly connects to both the Altar Central and Altar East mineralized systems into what we would characterize as a complex but large mineralized system. And really, I think the takeaway here that's really important for people to understand is that we did a very coarse grid of drilling, 200-meter centers, and that's large even by copper porphyry standards. And every one of those holes hit mineralization. And this is indicative of really the size of this system, but also mineralization remains open in multiple directions, and that will really be the focus of the upcoming 2023-2024 drill program, to really start to understand what the full footprint of this deposit is, and to start to really get an idea moving forward as we progress to an updated resource calculation and then eventually a PEA. So going back to this plan map again, what I'd like to show you now is a cross section, northwest, southeast, and we're going to be looking towards the north. And so this is a bit of a busy slide, but this is basically where we left off the last webinar I did back on June 8th, 2023, when we released the results from drill holes 227 and 228. And what you can see on here is, again, you can see the conceptual pit in the black dashed line. You can see all the drill holes with copper equivalent grades on them. And then superimposed on that, we can see that very large resistivity feature here, conductivity. And you can see that all of the drill holes that are piercing into that very large body are mineralized. And these were, I'm not going to go through these in detail. This is all stuff that we've covered in previous webinars, and they're in press releases. But all of these hit substantially long runs of reasonable copper grades. So where are we now? So this is the same section, and what I've put on here is the block model of the 220 from 2021, and you can see the part that's being reported to date is the part that's inside the pit. There are blocks that occur below the pit, but those are not considered resource, but they do have the criteria to have a block that if we could get it into some sort of a mineable geometry, either in a pit or an underground scenario, that would be considered resource. And so what we would like to report today are the holes that are these holes. You can see them in these sort of magenta traces here. And you can see again that large geophysical feature. Although we were doing very large step outs, there's still a significant portion of the anomaly that has still to be drill tested. That distance is over 2 kilometer strike length. So we're talking about a very large, contiguously mineralized, or potentially contiguously mineralized. It's certainly contiguously mineralized in this 1.5-ish kilometer segment here. And you'll see that with the new results that we just put out, mineralization does continue. Some of the results that we just released on 2 days ago, hole 189 extension hit 970 meters of 0.35. Most of that was all in wall rock. That hole doesn't occur on this section, but is somewhat close to this section. Hole 230 was a hole that was only drilled to about 600 meters depth, and there were some operational issues, so we stopped that hole. So it really was just starting to get into the main mineralized zone before we had to shut the hole down. Hole 232 hit over 500 meters of 0.3. That hole is drilled off to the north slightly of this section. It's being slightly projected, and so it's getting out towards the northern edge of the mineralized system. Hole 231 hit 558 meters of 0.44 copper equivalent. We extended drill hole 228 in a hole called 228 extension. That made a higher grade intercept of 638 meters of 0.65. Within that, there's some higher grade runs as well. You can see there's a core area in here that's quite nice grade. Hole 229 hit 650 meters of 0.54. And then hole 124 extension, you can see had chattery mineralization, and then we had to shut the hole down just before we were planning to get into the mineralized zone. We had to shut that hole down because of heavy snowfall that hit the project area, and that really was when we took the decision for the safety of all the people to shut the program down for the season. So there is an option that we could go back and potentially try to go back into that hole, but we're actually looking at potential other options that might be a little bit more advantageous for us, but that's still work that's in progress. And again, just to give you an idea of the scale here, I mean, these holes look like they're very close to one another, but you can see that some of these are being projected slightly off of the section, and you can see that most of these holes are somewhere between 200 and 250 meters apart. So there's still very widely spaced mineralization, and the mineralization, you can see the block model now with the block model inside the pit on this particular section. There you can see the blocks that fall below the pit on this particular section. That area there of where we know now we've got contiguous mineralization is about 1.5 kilometers. And there's the geophysical anomaly on the same section. And again, now if we look at that, that's over 2 kilometers. So there's still a significant portion on this section that needs to be drill tested. This is an area we call Altar Central North Extension, and I want to really get people's eyes on why we say that. And I put a little small plan map, and hopefully you can see this. But that's that same map that I showed earlier, and you can see the pink magenta line here. That's where the section goes. You can see the location of Altar Central, Altar East, and Altar United. And you can see how that section actually goes through the Altar United and Altar East areas, which if we go up to the cross section here, are these areas here, but actually goes to the north of the main Altar Central ore body. Yet there's still mineralization here. And so this is an area that does warrant additional drilling and could extend the Altar Central mineralization further to the north up here. So this is just a perspective view, one that I show quite often in these presentations. And you can see we're looking towards the southeast, and you can see our camp in the distance here. You can see the radio QDM drilling over here on the west side. And then you can see the main Altar Central drilling and the main Altar East drilling. And this is a view of what we had prior to last year's drill campaign. And those of you will remember that we drilled drill hole 221 in the middle, almost like a wildcat hole, and we hit over 1,000 meters of 0.4 copper in an area that nobody ever thought before that there was mineralization. Subsequent to drilling that hole, we got the results back from our 3D IP and MT geophysical survey, and that indicated that there was this very large conductive feature here shown in red, and that hole had pierced through that So that opened up the possibility of testing that perhaps the rest of this big anomaly was also mineralized. If we fast forward now, this is what it looks like today after our last year's campaign. And I'll just flip back and forth here so you can see how we've basically filled in that complete area, and you can see that the mineralization is quite interesting. And there's still areas on this particular view that require additional drilling. And again, just to reiterate, that's over 2 kilometers strike length in this direction. And then perpendicular to this, it's also roughly about 2 kilometers. As I've mentioned in previous webinars, that doesn't mean that the whole thing is going to be equally mineralized. But I think our hit success ratio here on drilling holes into this anomaly has been very impressive. And some of the technical people that are out there that might be listening who know me know that prior to this, I was not a huge advocate or fan of geophysics. But after doing this work and having the success, I'm now converted that when applied correctly by geophysical companies that have good technology and know what they're doing in the processing, they really can help the exploration effort. And so I really like to do a shout out and thanks to our colleagues at Southern Rock Geophysics in Santiago. They've been a pleasure to work with, and I think this is a really good case study in the future of how geophysics can actually lead to significant discoveries. So just a little bit of an update on where things are today, and many of the photos I'm going to show you have been taken in the last 2 days. Our camp is now open and fully functional. This marks the earliest that the camp at the Altar project in its history has been open. So we're quite encouraged that the guys have done a really great job of getting the camp open as early as possible. We've got the fuel tanks are all full. The generators are ready to go. All the supplies are coming up, and we're basically getting ready to start the campaign. We're in the moment. These are photos from about a day yesterday and the day before. We're in the process right now of removing snow up into the project area. I think you can see there's parts of the project area where there's no snow, and there's other parts of the project area where the snow is actually still quite thick. But we're making our way up to the areas where we hope to drill. And so this is an ongoing effort, but the guys have done a really good job of getting us in there as early as possible to make sure we maximize the time that we have to drill this campaign. I can also report that we now have 2 rigs at the project. One arrived yesterday and one is on the road and should arrive later this afternoon. And we have 2 additional rigs that will be arriving sometime next week. So we should have all 4 rigs up at the project by the end of next week. And the idea right now is we hope, and this is dependent on all of that snow removal and our ability to get to some of the pads where we want to be able to drill. And we hope to be drilling by early next week. So stay tuned. There will probably be an announcement once we are up and drilling. And it's because that we're still removing a lot of snow and we don't know exactly what pads we can get into. We haven't finalized exactly the holes that we're going to start on. We've got a number of possibilities, and it's a function of which ones we can get to right now because of snow, and also A lot of the holes that we're planning to start on are holes that are either our holes from last year, or they're potentially historic drill holes that we want to try to re-enter. And by re-entering old holes, it means that we don't have to drill as many meters to get down and test some of the areas that we want to test. But that also means we have to find the old hole. And in some cases, we've been able to do that. But in many other cases, the old holes are not that easy to find. But our guys are working to try to locate those holes and those collars so that we can drill. So I won't be showing a map today showing where we're going to have the holes to start, because I don't know where those are going to be. But in the next following days, we will probably have a better idea where we can get to with these rigs. So what's the plan for 2023, 2024? As I mentioned, the idea is to complete the 200-meter space drill out of the Altar Central, United, and East Zone to really define the overall deposit size and footprint. We'll have 4 rigs up there very shortly, and we hope to have a drill season between 7 and 8 months, and commencing probably, like I said, next week with the first 2 rigs. We're fully budgeted for approximately 20,000 meters of drilling. Depending on time, meterage, and how things go with the main Altar area and market conditions, we may be able to possibly test additional satellite targets as well. But that'll probably happen, if it does happen, towards the first part of next year. We also hope to complete an updated mineral resource estimate for the full project area in the second half of 2024. That resource estimate will include all of the 2023-2024 drilling that we're just embarking on now for the whole combined Altar Central, United, and East areas. And we'll also conclude the first resource up for the radio QDM areas. Upon completion of that resource estimate, then we'll move towards a maiden PEA for the project, and we're estimating that towards the end of 2024 or the first quarter of 2025. In addition, we're doing a bunch of support studies for both a PEA and some things for eventually probably a PFS study. We're doing hyperspectral core scanning to get a better idea on the mineralogy, the gangue mineralogy. We've had a lot of success doing this at our sister company, Regulus, and our Antiquary project. And so we're about to commence on a fairly robust program of core scanning at the Altar project as well. We're also starting to move towards more detailed geotechnical studies, metallurgical review, and possible selection of samples for further metallurgical test work. Also working very strongly towards doing more water balance studies, glacial studies, and basic environmental baseline work that we're required to do. So there's a lot of other things going on that are critical to moving the project forward that really sometimes aren't market sexy things, but they're critical to the advancement of the project. We're also hoping to complete the road into our new Sinicero target. We got about 75% in last year, and we had some slide issues on part of the road. And so rather than fight that, we decided to focus our activities in other areas. So we'll go back in, and we think we've got a plan now how we can complete the last 25% of that road to get into that new target. And then once we can get in there, we'll complete surface mapping, rock chip sampling at that target, as well as the Southeast Gold target. We've just hired 3 to 4 new geologists. So that really bolsters our bench in terms of being able to have the person power to go out and do some of these ancillary tasks and not take away from the geologic team that's focused on the drilling, both the logistical aspects of the drilling, but also the technical logging aspects of the drilling. We're continuing to make improvements and doing some expansions to the camp. The camp is very old. It's the original camp back from the Peregrine Metal days. And so we're trying to make this camp. We know that this project's going to start to accelerate and move forward. So we have to be able to house consultants and potentially more drill crews as well. So we're working on those kinds of improvements and looking at expansions. And the other really important activity that we're doing, and again, this is one that sometimes in the marketplace doesn't really make a lot of noise, but it's absolutely critical, is we're really increasing our community relations activities. We have very good working relationships with the local communities. A significant amount of our workforce comes from the local communities, but we've decided, in order to get better connection and information about what we're doing at the project, is that we're setting up a small information office in the community of Bariel, which is the closest town to the project, and we pass through that town in order to get up to the project. So that's an initiative I think that is going to be very important for us. The community is fully behind us, and this will just reinforce, I think, that support. So before we open it up to questions and answers, I really want to do a shout out and thank you to the Aldebaran exploration team in Argentina for their great work last campaign and really delivering and building Altar to the project that it is today, and also to the team for getting us into the project this year, the earliest in the history of the project. And we'll be drilling, like I said, next week, and that will be by far the earliest that anybody's drilled on the project since it was originally found back in the late 80s. So big shout out to them. And so just to wrap up, Aldebaran and the Altar project, we're going to have multiple upcoming catalysts of news flow with the obviously with all the drill results starting to come in probably the next couple months. We've already got a very significant resource, and I think that you can see from what I've shown you today that it will significantly grow, and we will continue to significantly grow it through this year's upcoming drill campaign. We're in a very high-profile location. This San Juan province is probably the hottest copper exploration area on the planet at the moment. And so there's a lot of activity, a lot of demand for drill rigs, a lot of demand for people, etc. So it's an exciting place to be working. And I think that Aldebaran is a compelling valuation. We're fully funded and we're ready to go and really start to tame this beast. If you have any further questions, I encourage you to reach out to Ben Charrington, our investor relations manager. I think information you can find on our website. And so with that, thank you for your attention. And now we'll open it up to questions and answers.
Thank you very much, Kevin and John. A couple of questions to go through from the audience so far. First one is from BP, asks, are you actively looking for additional strategics to South 32, or are you cashed up through this market?
I can answer that one. We're in a very good financial position for this market. So we have plenty of funding to complete the full drill program Kevin's laid out and all the other additional activities we have to that right now. With South 32 as a strategic partner, and keep in mind we're earning into the project from Sibanye-Stillwater, and with Route 1 as a major investor, we're really pretty well positioned with our strategic partners right now. When we contemplated how we would acquire the funding for this year, we were approached by a number of other groups, and we felt it was best to use the strong support from our existing strategic partners right now. It kind of fills the dance card up a little too much if you get too many strategic partners on the same project. So we're very pleased we have that strong support. We felt we didn't need to introduce an additional partner and complicate things at that, but we're also very well aware of a number of groups monitoring us and watching us. We'd prefer to keep them out as potential suitors down the road.
That makes sense. Graham asks, how does the discovery of Altar United change the ultimate size of the resource?
Kevin, you want to address that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that, I don't know the number, but I think that, you can see that it's volume-wise, just looking at it, it's significant. And so I would probably, just to pull a random number out of the air, and don't hold me to it, but I would say that, we're looking at definitely more than a 50% increase, and maybe even as high as 100% increase. So somewhere in that range. So it's potentially significant, but the thing is that it's probably still not in a way that we would want to go and put together a formal resource calculation, because we still need drill holes to really kind of confirm and put that geometrically correctly, so that when we do put out the resource, it's something that we're confident and that we can stand up and defend.
Makes sense. So Graham asked a question that was covered during the presentation, but it's always good to reiterate. He's looking for the exploration timeline for the summer from here. If you can just briefly summarize.
Well, we're going to start drilling next week. I can see there's a question on there, how many rigs are turning right now? The answer to that is 0, but maybe next week there will be 2. And then in the following weeks, there'll be 4. So in terms of our field season up there is 7 to 8 months long. So we're drilling fairly deep holes. These holes will range anywhere from there's a possibility some of our holes may only need to go 800 meters, but the majority of them are 1,000 plus, up to 1,500 in some cases. Those holes take a couple months to drill. So you can imagine it's 2 months to drill them. Then you got to wait anywhere 3 to 4 weeks to get all your results and do all your QA, QC. So I think realistically, the first results here are going to be coming in maybe towards the end of this year or early next year. That's just the reality of timelines when you're drilling big systems and drilling deep holes like we are.
No, appreciate that. Adrian asks, will drill result announcements be batched or released individually as and when known?
I can answer that one. It makes sense for us really to batch results on this, and there's no magical number of how many you batch or what you do. You really kind of read the results as they come in and when your holes are finishing. And we won't be in a position where we're putting out single holes. That takes a lot of time to do, and I know we all would love to be seeing results in live time on it, but realistically, I think it'll be similar to the way we've reported in the past, where we typically batch 3 or 4 holes together. This last year was a little unusual, and the nature of the financing we're doing made it better to complete the financing and then put out results. So the final batch was a little bit larger, but under normal circumstances, I think we would attempt to be putting out a release every 6 weeks or so with 3 or 4 holes in it is kind of the typical pattern.
Oh, cheers. Thanks. Johan has a comment followed by a question. So he notes that delivered a lot of good results so far this year with great drill holes, managed to raise capital, and reach 60% earn in a difficult market. He does note the share price is similar to where it stood at the beginning of the year, and he's wondering what you think this is due to, apart from bad market sentiment.
If I could fully answer that question, I would have the best crystal ball out there. I think if anyone working in or investing in the space that we're in right now is fully aware that there's been a lot of pressure on share prices for most of the companies that are like ourselves right now. So we're in a tough market with a lot of downward pressure on this. A lot of this is from the feedback we're receiving from investors and fund managers and others, is concern about potential market downturns, not just commodity markets, but overall market downturns related to the effort to tame inflation and when will we see rates stop. So there's been a lot of hesitancy for investors to come into the market, a lot of cash parked on the sidelines, anticipating that we might see a downturn right now. I think we're beginning to see that more strongly in our space. That's a tough trend to buck against. A lot of my peers are joking that flat is the new up in this space. I think our share price has held pretty well compared to some of our peers that have been hit a little bit harder. I wish it was different, but what we focus on really is creating that fundamental value in the project. And what I look to is that there's a lot of recognition and optimism that the copper market in particular will be very well positioned in the coming years to do very well. The amount of copper that will be necessary for reaching goals for electrification worldwide far outstrips the possible production of copper. So it's very likely that we'll see copper return to a very strong position in the not too distant future, I believe. And so what we want to do is focus on advancing the project. We're in the very fortunate position to have the cash to be able to do that. And so we'll focus on really towards the mid part of next year and the latter part of next year to be able to put out that updated resource estimate, hit our first PEA on it, earn into 80% in the project, and be producing strong results when the market does come back. So that's really where we want to focus on.
Thank you. Gary asks, can you mine that deep copper?
That's a very good question, and partly why when Kevin mentioned we're not in a position to say what the resource increase right now is that we need to understand the full nature of the deposit first, and then when we do that, we'll need to understand what portions of it will be mineable and by what methods on this. So it'll be an evaluation of what can be economically or profitably be mined by open pit versus what might be able to be mined by bulk underground mining. We also have to look at processing techniques. There are a couple different options emerging on how we might go forward with that have strong implications on CapEx of the project. So there's a lot to go on that. We're not fully in a position to be able to answer that right now. Portions of the deposit, significant portions of deposit, quite clearly can be approached right now. How much we can get, particularly in the deeper portions of the project, is very much a work in progress right now. So that'll be a lot of that background work that Kevin's mentioning, is working on metallurgy, working on processing techniques, working on pit slope angles, working on mining methods. There's a lot of work for us to do to be able to fully answer that question. But I think with the funding we have and the program we've outlined, we'll be in a very good position to answer those questions best in about a year from now.
No, thanks for that additional context. PT asks, at what stage does Aldebaran look for a buyer?
It's what I might do is just kind of go back and talk about our overall strategy, not just in Aldebaran, but in the two companies we've been involved in prior to this as well. And all three of the companies that Kevin and Mark Wayne and myself have been involved with, our strategy's been the same. We really try to identify a project like this that has potential to be a very large copper or copper gold deposit. Drill that out, de-risk it, demonstrate how it can be profitably exploited moving forward, and then ideally sell that to a major mining company. And our targeted, what we've noticed is that many projects that go through this process, we're not the only company that has this strategy, tend to sell at about a pre-feasibility stage. There's a lot of value that can be added up to a pre-feasibility stage. Beyond a pre-feasibility stage, that work is really best done by the group that will eventually mine the project. And so having said that, it also depends very much on the market. You can have a great project at pre-feasibility stage and be in a really cruddy market, and the major mining companies are simply not in the position to be able to buy it at that time. And so ideally, we get the right project, we get it fully defined, we get it de-risked through about pre-fees where we can add that value, and we're in a robust market to go forward. And so all of those things it's like catching lightning in a bottle. It has to correlate well on that. We're onto a great project right now. We have the funding to move it forward on this. Our first company, Antares Minerals, we were moving along that pathway, fully thinking we needed to go to a pre-feasibility, and First Quantum purchased that project from us upon completion of the PEA. We were also in a very hot market right at that point in time. So it's rare that a project goes before a PEA. Ideally, we believe you'd like to sell it between a PEA and a pre-feas. If you're in a cruddy market, you have to hold on a little bit later than that to see where it goes on it. But I kind of just intuitively like the timing that I see in the markets right now. I know the markets are terrible, and we all focus on that in the short term. But I do believe we'll be in a very good position towards the latter part of next year when we see the markets come back, and I think we'll be delivering a project at the right time. So I think for us, really 18 months from now, it will be entering into a window when groups are more likely to be looking for these type of projects and with the ability to acquire them. So that's there's no magic moment on it by any means at all. It's a coincidence of a number of matters.
Well, thank you. Jorge asks, can you comment about hole 230 being canceled due to technical reasons? He notes it seems like a zone where one can expect high grade based on the holes surrounding. And the follow-up, he asks, are these zones between 225B and 224 and to the north the primary target of the next drilling campaign?
Kevin, you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. That's kind of a two-pronged question there. To answer the first one, yes, one of the areas we will be drilling will be to the area to the south of hole 230. There is another option. We're weighing whether we go back into hole 230. We're not 100% sure that we can get back into hole 230 to extend it, because you got to remember, in some of these holes, if there's any drill steel or rods or things that were lost in those holes, you can't go back into them. And so those are all considerations. We do have a couple of alternative holes that we've planned that will address what this gentleman is alluding to. In terms of drilling in between 225B and 224, our objective right now is not to do more infill drilling in between. We don't need to do that right now. And so at 200-meter spacing, we will get inferred resource. And at this stage, to move towards a PEA, that's all we need is inferred. At some point in the future, to go to a PFS, then we would need indicated and measured, and that would require us to do more infill drilling. But at this stage, there's no plan to go in between those 200-meter spaced holes to do infill. It's just not a good use right now of the limited resources. I mean, $20 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you're drilling a project of this size and these kinds of depth holes, it doesn't go as far as you think it does. So we have to be very, very frugal and have a very good system of triage as to what holes we really select and execute and drill.
Oh, thanks. Adrian asked, are there any new extraction technologies in the wings that might help reduce the need for expensive mine construction?
John, I'll let you tackle that one.
Yeah, I think what Adrian might be referring to is there are some technologies that are being developed in the copper space, in the porphyry copper space, that potentially have impact, and most notably Rio Tinto's recently formed a division of Rio Tinto called Rio Tinto Newton that is exploring the ability to do heap leaching of primary copper sulfides. In copper exploitation, we can in some ways divide copper mineralization into two styles: secondary copper mineralization, which is either oxide or sulfide mineralization, and primary. With secondary mineralization really being mineralization that's been affected by weathering, and it changes the mineralogy, and it allows that secondary mineralization to be processed by heap leach processing, SXEW heap leach processing, where you produce a copper cathode on site and you avoid the necessity of milling and concentration. But primary mineralization, the unweathered portion of deposits, which are the bulk of most deposits, have always required milling and concentration, producing a mineral concentrate that has to be exported to a smelter, which is often across an ocean. And it requires quite a bit more capital and energy and water to do that type of a system. And so if the concept of being able to heap leach primary copper sulfide mineralization bears fruit going forward, that offers the opportunity to greatly reduce the capital cost for a project, which is very much of importance to us moving forward. It also potentially uses a lot less water, definitely a lot less energy, and you produce copper in country, which can be very beneficial. A country like Argentina is concerned about export of jobs or value from a project, and so that could go forward. So Rio Tinto is not the only group that's exploring this. There are a number of, quite frankly, every major mining company, major copper mining company is attempting to crack this same nut. They just feel that they've achieved results that are quite interesting right now, to the point where they have formally developed a division of it, and they're commercializing this technology. We don't have an agreement with that for our project in Altar, but our sister company, Regulus Resources, does have an agreement with Rio Tinto to explore the technology on a project we have in Peru. So we're very close to this. We know a lot about what they're doing. And Rio Tinto also has an agreement with Los Azules of McEwen Mining, just to the north of us in Argentina, where they're exploring the applicability of that technology onto that project. So we're very closely monitoring. It's one of the factors that goes into our decision to do that first PEA once we know the full size of the project, but also to know if a technology like this might emerge that would dramatically change the way we approach the project. It has potential. So long answer to say, yes, there is technology emerging that we're closely monitoring. Could have very important implications for this project and for the industry in general. Quite frankly, I think if the industry can develop these, the ability to heap leach primary sulfide mineralization, it may be the saving grace that allows us to possibly deliver the amount of copper that will be required for us to move into a greener energy space overall on this. So I think it's an area to watch very closely and see how this develops.
Great, thank you. We're getting towards the end of the hour, but there are a couple of questions that came in over email that I would like to address quickly before we go. The first one is, are you concerned about the arsenic content at Altar?
That's kind of a good question to follow up on the one we just answered on this. We do have some arsenic in the upper portions of the Altar project. If we go a more conventional approach to this and produce a concentrate that would then be sold to a smelter, there levels that in the early parts of the mine might produce penalty levels on it, but it would be a marketable con. So it's a manageable issue, but it does have consequences in deductions to the product that would be produced from the mine. However, the technology we just talked about primary copper sulfide leach gets around that, because you stabilize that arsenic into a non-soluble mineral called scorodite, and you don't have your arsenic report to your final copper product. So it's one of the many benefits of primary copper sulfide leaching, that is that if you do have some arsenic in your deposit, it really removes that as a negative impact.
Great, thanks. Another question, why did you decide to go for another strategic financing rather than bringing new shareholders on board?
Our first attempt really was, and we've seen this pattern develop each of the last 2 years. And that as we were producing drill results in the early part of this year, say through March, April, we were putting out good results. We were getting good market response. We were exploring the possibility of doing a typical private placement with new shareholders coming in. And the feedback that we were getting from banks was that it might be difficult to do. And as we pursue, the advice was to wait a few weeks and see what the market would be like. And the market kept deteriorating on us, and it became more and more challenging. And to pursue that pathway would have been much more dilutive to our current shareholders. It would have involved a full warrant and a heavy discount to our current share price. So, and no guarantee of completion. We probably would have had to announce an open private placement and then see if we could complete it to the level we'd want to do. And that puts us at risk of repricing and things like that. We weren't the only ones that were caught into this. Many of our peers were doing the same. And I think you'll notice that many of our peers, particularly those that are on major projects like this, elected to do similar things that we did, where their strategic partners really are the ones that stepped up and put the financial backing. Keep in mind, those strategic partners are the ones that know the project best and want to see that project move forward. So the decision we made to go the pathway we did was very much taking care of our current shareholders. We're shareholders ourselves on this and minimizing the dilution on that. It's required for us to raise money to move a project like this forward, but you don't want to blow your share count out too much in the process of doing that, or you're really just trading flat at that. So it was very much a decision that was dictated by the conditions in the market and also our desire to do what's best for our shareholders.
Oh, thanks for that. Last question. I hate to end on politics, but it's the last question. Somebody asks, to what extent do you think the outcome of the Argentine general election this year might impact plans at Altar?
Just to remind those of you that might be following this closely, is that we have presidential elections this month in Argentina. There are currently 3 candidates that are the potential candidates to win the presidency for the next round on this. All 3 are pro-mining, which we're in an unusual situation. In most countries, when we have an election like this, we have at least one candidate that might not be very desirable for us going forward. But all 3 candidates are strongly endorsing the better development or addition or more development of commodities, not just copper and lithium, also shale oil in the southern part of the country, as a fundamental motor to drive the economies and improve economic conditions in Argentina. So we're in a very fortunate position that any of the candidates that might win are very publicly embracing the further development of copper production going forward. So we're in a very good position in that sense. What we want to do is see the elections go smoothly, and then we want to see the candidate that wins organize broad support for their agenda going forward. And so any election brings the potential for a little bit of chatter and activity that goes on as we get new ministers put into position and we have to meet new people going forward. But I'm very confident that whoever wins the presidency and whoever they put in as their local officials will be very supportive of our efforts going forward.
I appreciate that. Again, thank you, John and Dr. Kevin, for taking us through the presentation. I also want to thank everybody who joined us, particularly those who submitted great questions today. If you didn't get a chance to get your questions answered, or if you're like me and you think of the perfect one right after the event ends, feel free to send through your contact details or contact Ben Charrington directly, and the Aldebaran team will be happy to follow up with you directly. Before we head out for the day, I'm going to throw it back to John and Dr. Kevin for a final word.
Okay,
well,
well,
I'd just like to
go ahead.
I'd just like to thank everybody for their time today. As John mentioned, we are in trying times in the market, but I want to reiterate to people that there are very few large copper projects in the hands of junior companies in the world. And so there's only a few of these opportunities. And, you know, this project will get monetized at some point here. And so it's just, we don't have crystal balls to know when that's going to happen, but it will happen. And so, and this will be on video, so you can mark it down that I said this on October 5th at 12 noon. So, but anyway, thank you, everybody. And I think it's going to be an exciting campaign, and stay tuned, and look forward to the next opportunity to talk to everybody.
Great. Well, thanks, Kevin. And with that strong statement in, I'm not sure what more I can say to that, but I will remind everybody that we're in a very nice position right now with the cash we have in hand, and that'll allow us to meet 3 really important milestones over the next 12 to 16 months on this. We'll be able to show the full size of the Altar system, that being Altar Central, East, and United. So we look forward to a mineral resource update in the second half of next year, and that will form the basis for us to be able to put out the first PEA on the project, a very important milestone. As I mentioned, completion of that PEA typically enters us into the window where enough is known about the project that we're more likely to draw out more serious interest in the project moving forward. And the third key milestone that we'll meet on that is that we'll have completed the investment necessary for us to earn into an 80% interest in the project. Our agreement with Sibanye-Stillwater allows us to go to 80%. This past year, we completed the first milestone of reaching the point where we now own 60% of the project. But this field campaign will put us to the point where we own the full 80% that we have exposure to. So those are 3 very key milestones coming up with the funding that we already have in hand. And we just have a lot of work to do over the next 12 months to get into that position. So I'm looking forward to a pretty exciting year next year as we really reveal the full potential value of this project.